Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, talks at the 31st EU-Russia summit have been constructive and substantive. We have dwelt on the topical issues of interaction in trade and economy, human and cultural spheres. We talked the issue of the further enhancement of our legal treaty of our relations. Russia and the EU are close partners. Europe is the largest investor in the Russian economy. The cumulative investment of the EU in Russia is $277 billion. Out of them, 105 is the foreign direct investment of Europe. In its turn, the Russian companies put up $77.4 billion in the EU countries, including $52 million of direct investment. This is the 60% share of our cumulative foreign investment. The European Union accounts for nearly half of the external trade of Russia. Last year, mutual trade, despite the complicated international and European economic situation, increased by 4.1% to be in excess of $410 billion. I'm sure that in the near future we'll be able to achieve the 500 billion mutual trade. We have discussed the margin in order to step up the mutual flow of goods, services and capital. We should be more dynamic in lifting the remaining customs, administrative and technical barriers. We should implement joint projects in industry, agriculture and finance. We have naturally discussed the issue of preparing the new agreement between Russia and the EU. This document has taken into account the changed international realities and bearing in mind the Eurasian integration. We believe that it would be quite feasible for the EU leadership to establish contacts, direct contacts with the Eurasian Economic Commission, heading the customs union and common economic space processes. The close cooperation of the two commissions would be of importance in the wake of the boost to integration that was given the other day in Astana at the meeting of the Supreme Eurasian Economic Council. We have talked mutual claims in trade. It's impossible not to have claims to one another, given the huge volume of relations that we have. Definitely there are some outstanding issues. This is normal. We all know them. They include the recycling fee, anti-dumping measures, sanitary and phytosanitary rules, etc. We have agreed to work jointly in a constructive manner to meet each other halfway. I'm sure it's possible. Definitely, traditionally, energy ranked high on our agenda today. In March, the roadmap of energy cooperation between Russia and EU till 2050 was signed and enacted. This document prescribes the strategic goal of establishment of a common European energy sector. Well, definitely, there are some outstanding and pending issues here as well. I will not mention them now. They are well known, but we are in contact with one another and we will look for and find mutually admissible solutions. We talked security and countering new challenges. Today we signed the agreement on drug precursors that will strengthen and consolidate the cooperation of anti-narcotics services of the Russian Federation and the EU. While exchanging opinions on the topical international issues, we dwelt a lot on the Syrian question. Let me reiterate that we believe for our part that any attempts of direct military interference or influencing the situation by force are doomed to fail and will entail grave consequences, humanitarian consequences. Definitely, we gave our assessment of the decision of the EU to lift embargo and supply arms to Syrian oppositions. We were frustrated. I will not conceal that. We decided to coordinate closer to make Geneva II a success and work on other acute and topical international issues. By way of conclusion, I'd like to thank our European friends for a frank, useful and constructive exchange of opinions that we have had today. Thank you so much.
Dear Mr. President, let me first of all thank you for your hospitality I would also like to thank the President for having chosen this remarkable venue for our summit, which symbolizes Russia's Eurasian dimension. It could also be a splendid location for major exhibitions in the future. We have had good and useful discussions today and yesterday evening, reviewing the wide range of EU-Russia relations. The EU and Russia are strategic partners. We share a common continent and history. We gain a lot from working together to contribute to security and stability, to promote prosperity, jobs and growth. Our common aim is to reap the full potential of our strategic partnership. We are also global partners, and together we have to find solutions for global economic challenges, issues of global governance and security challenges in many parts of the world. The European Union is pleased to give its full support to Russia's G20 chairmanship. We share the goals of reforming financial institutions, fighting against tax fraud and tax evasion, and setting the global economy back on track for growth and jobs. We have discussed the steps to take in the run-up to the G20 summit in St. Petersburg next September. And we are confident that the G20 summit will be crowned by success. We have had an exchange on the economic situation in Russia and the European Union. I emphasized the restored financial stability in the Eurozone. The euro is no longer under existential threat. I explained the ongoing efforts within the European Union to stimulate growth and fight against youth unemployment. These issues will feature prominently on the agenda of the upcoming European Council end of June. We have discussed our common global security interess and our concerns about the situation in Syria, Iranian nuclear program, Afghanistan, and North Korea. On all these challenges, the EU and Russia work closely together. On Syria, the European Union welcomes the joint Russian-US initiative for a Geneva II conference. We are giving our full support to this very important political peace process. The international community must address its responsibilities in the face of this humanitarian tragedy, which has very serious spillover effects on security, stability, and economic development in the region and far beyond. The Union will continue to work for the establishment of a democratic and united Syria, respectful of human rights, fundamental freedoms, and rights of minorities. I welcome the fact that we have recently relaunched our cooperation on counter-terrorism, and we are now working together to deepen and broaden its scope. I also raised the need to strengthen cooperation on security in Europe, starting with the protracted conflicts in our common neighborhood. I recalled that we need a comprehensive settlement of the Transnistria conflict, and basic principles for a future settlement should be agreed now. This is a conflict which can be solved. We call for continued engagement and cooperation on Nagorno-Karabakh in support of the existing negotiating processes. We welcome positive developments in the Russian-Georgian relations. It is important to strengthen stability in the Caucasus based on respect for the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. We also have discussed the importance of civil society and NGOs and their contribution to the strengthening of democracy and in particular freedom of expression and other fundamental freedoms. Legislative framework should recognize this and protect the space for action of civil society. We referred to the important dialogue we already have, even if our views do not always coincide. To conclude, Mr. President, let me thank you for your hospitality and the fruitful and open exchange we have had when discussing all these issues. Thank you for your attention. Большое спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm indeed very pleased to be here with you today at the heart of the Urals. In the past, the Urals were considered to be the natural frontier of Europe, and Yekaterinburg was precisely at the frontier between Europe and Asia. Some call this city a window to Asia. However, in the 21st century, the notion of frontiers, administrative or physical, have not exactly the same significance. And the Urals should be seen more as a bridge than as a barrier. That is why, even if the European Commission, as you know, does not vote regarding the exhibition, World Exhibition for 2020, I'm really impressed by the candidature of Yekaterinburg, and I wish you all the best for that candidature. It was in this spirit of bridge that we had the summit today, and indeed our open exchanges during yesterday's informal dinner. These discussions followed the very useful exchanges that we have held in Moscow last March at the occasion of our executive-to-executive consultations, the meeting between the government of the Russian Federation and the European Commission. Our cooperation spans a wide range of areas, and today we sign an agreement on cooperation on drug precursors. This is important for the fight against drugs, both on the supply and demand side. More generally, I'm glad that we do have an ambitious common vision for the future of our relations. We have discussed today concretely how to move forward through an ambitious and comprehensive new European Union EU-Russia agreement. One of the pillars of our relations is, of course, strong trade flows. Last year, we have reached a record level of 336 billion euros of exchanges. But there is potential for more, and I think we should create the right conditions to expand these flows. Russia's accession to WTO was a major step forward in this regard. We also discussed today the effective implementation of WTO commitments. President Putin mentioned some issues already. We have raised concerns with the cars recycling fee, which we hope can be lifted by July. We received good news on this matter, and also other matters on the very extensive trade relationship between Russia and the European Union. We are also making good work in our Partnership for Modernization, which is under full implementation, with new projects being prepared and considerable loan funding available, including now 800 million euros in loans for small and medium-sized enterprises. And as you know, the EIB, European Investment Bank, apart from the EBRD, are also present in this cooperation. Our energy cooperation is also mutually beneficial, but we should deepen it further. Last March, the European Commission and the government of the Russian Federation agreed on the joint energy roadmap 2050. This is a significant achievement. The European Union energy market, that is the world's largest, offers important business opportunities to Russian companies, and Russia will, of course, remain a very important energy supplier to Europe. Visa-free travel remains an important common goal. To achieve it, it is important now to fully implement the agreed common steps. The European Union is also ready to conclude negotiations on an upgraded visa facilitation agreement, provided technical details are clarified and that future regulations in the area of transport and mobility do not negatively affect our citizens and transport operators. We are committed to working together with Russia to make the G20 summit in St. Petersburg a success for Russia, but also a success for Europe and for the wider world. In line with our internal work in the European Union, we hope that growth can be prioritized and that the G20 can also address other important issues like the fight against tax fraud and tax evasion. I have said in the past that a strategic partnership like ours needs to be based on strategic trust. These summits serve precisely to build that trust. That's why I want once again to thank President Putin for having brought us to this great city. Yekaterinburg is not anymore just a frontier. It is today a place where we stretch to hold hands and join efforts for the sake of a better future for our citizens. I thank you for your attention.
Спасибо большое, уважаемые дамы и господа. Сейчас предусматривается всего 4 вопроса. 2 для российских журналистов, 2 для международных. Мы начинаем с наших гостей, пожалуйста.
Thank you. So first question for the international press. Yes, sir, please identify yourself.
Good afternoon, Reuters News here. I would like to address my question to Mr. Van Rompuy. Have your position come any closer on Syria during talks today, with fundamental disagreements still in place, one being European Union's plans to supply arms to Syrian rebels, and the other one being Russia's plans to supply S-300 missiles to Damascus. And I would also like to use this occasion to clarify with Mr. President Putin whether the S-300s have been actually delivered. If not, when is that coming? Many thanks.
Thank you. On Syria, the European Union has no doubts that only a political solution through negotiations will bring back peace to Syria and to the region. And that's why both at European Council and the Council of Foreign Ministers level, the European Union has welcomed and praised the initiative launched by Foreign Minister Lavrov and Secretary of State Kerry to convene an international conference based on the Geneva Principles with the participation of representatives of the Syrian regime and the opposition. The first goal of this conference should be to establish confidence-building measures, open access for humanitarian assistance, release for prisoners, gradual ceasefire, UN observers, and so on, in a progressive manner that could pave the way for a transition that will allow the warring parties to replace weapons with political arguments and dialogue. While the European Union has not renewed its collective embargo on arms, which means that each member state has recovered its competence in the field of arms exports, member states have committed publicly not to supply any weapons at all for the time being. The aim is precisely to give negotiations a real chance to move forward. Intense and significant contacts have been taking place between the Russian administration and the EU officials in the last weeks, which have shown wide convergence of views regarding the launch of these negotiations. It's important that we concentrate today on the preparation of this conference and the launch of a credible process to bring peace to Syria.
Что касается поставок
As
оружия,
regards the deliveries of arms and S-300, as you know, upon the initiative of Great Britain, an international instrument has been agreed on the UN basis on non-supplies of arms to non-governmental groups, and we assume that all the members of the UN are going to join this instrument, and starting from today, they will abide by the rules and principles proposed by our British colleagues. This is first thing. Second, I may be mistaken, but in 1998, the European Union adopted a document to more or less the same end. Supplies of arms to the conflict-stricken regions of the world. Probably it's not a legally binding instrument, but it's the moral basis for operating in this sensitive sphere. As regards Russian supplies and deliveries, let me recall that we are quite transparent in our internationally recognized contracts of supplies. We are not in breach of any international provisions, and we are fully in the scope of international law. As regards S-300, this is one of the best anti-missile defense systems in the world. Probably it is the best. It's very powerful weapon. We don't want to upset the balance in the region. We signed the contract several years ago. So far it has not been implemented. Continue a question from the Russian journalists. introduce yourselves.
Radio station Vesti FM, I address my question to all the three leaders. I'd like to dwell a little bit upon the question that has been already asked. You've already talked about the goals of Geneva II. Could you formulate what are the principal obstacles in the way of holding this conference? And the second question, it is well known that even though Turkey is not a member of the European Union, it is aspiring to accede to the EU. What is your stance towards what is going on now in the streets of Istanbul and other Turkish cities? Can it be construed as the fact that the Arab Spring has now engulfed Turkey? As for the conference, we've already announced, my colleagues and my colleagues from the European Commission have reaffirmed it. We have a common position with regard to holding Geneva II conference. That is what unites our European colleagues and us. Minister Lavrov and State Secretary Kerry have prepared an agreement on that. It has been agreed upon. We've committed ourselves to convincing the Syrian leadership to take part in this conference. As is well known, the Syrian leadership has officially declared that it is willing to take part in Geneva II conference. What are the obstacles? The obstacles are the following. First, there is no goodwill on the part of the armed opposition. There is no common platform amid the Syrian opposition, and it is impossible to determine for sure who should represent the Syrian opposition, who should participate. I believe that it is necessary to resolve the issues as soon as possible. As for Turkey, especially over the last years, our relations with Turkey have been characterized by a very high level of cordiality. We believe that the Turkish leadership is going to be engaged in dialogue with civil society and the opposition. It is going to resolve outstanding issues that have translated into mass protests. I believe these issues are going to be discussed and people will listen to each other. I believe that it is going to be so.
So on Syria, I made my statement. Of course, there are a lot of problems to be solved. Problems of composition. I mentioned the participation of the Syrian regime and of the opposition. Problems of time frame, problems of date. Most important thing is that we focus now on the negotiations. And we are in close contact, our High Representative, with Foreign Minister Lavrov, also with Secretary of State Kerry, to give our position on this. But we are fully supporting a political process. There is no military solution for the Syrian conflict. So the only alternative are negotiations. And we owe this to the Syrian people. That's my first remark. And the second is on Turkey. I make no comments on an internal situation in a country, especially not in a country as Turkey, which is a candidate country for the European Union. Every country has its problems, and I'm sure that the Turkish government is perfectly capable to deal with the problems ahead.
Regarding Syria, I just want to make a point, in fact, I made during our conversation, since the European Commission is a major donor of humanitarian aid. Indeed, the European Union Commission plus member states, we are by far the biggest donor of humanitarian aid to the refugees coming from Syria. Just some days ago, I received the major international organizations humanitarian aid from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to the Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Aid, the World Food Programme. And a point I've underlined, independently from the broader issue of political and security concern that was already expressed, is the need immediately to guarantee unrestricted and unconditional access to the victims. And this is an appeal that the international community has to make clear both to the government and to the opposition parties. there. Because the situation is really dramatic. We have received the full debriefing of the situation. It's really a humanitarian catastrophe, what is going on in Syria. And of course, while we expect that Geneva II produces results, including in this area, I believe that now all of us, with the channels we have, should convey this message to the parties in conflict. Unrestricted, unconditional access to humanitarian aid, because what's going on in Syria today is indeed a stain in mankind's conscience.
Thank you. Next question.
As you know, several TV channels have broadcast members of the Syrian opposition take out and eviscerate their victims and eat them. I hope that such members of the opposition are not going to take part in those negotiations, otherwise it would be difficult to ensure the security of the delegation.
Yes?
Ulf Mauder from DPA News Agency. I'd like to come back to the WTO membership. A lot of manufacturers are actually complaining about obstacles and protective measures in Russia. And Russian people in the street, they are expecting lower prices. When will we actually see these effects in practice? And another question on latest political developments in Russia. Obviously, there's a lot of concerns in German enterprises and other Western enterprises that raids in NGOs and the reason the flooding of Mr. Guriev to Paris last week might actually damage Russia's image as a country for foreign investors. How much do you expect these developments to damage Russia's picture? Thank you.
Mentioning the issue of trade, first of all, the good news, because I think it is important to take note of the good news. Just yesterday, the Statistical Office of the European Union, Eurostat, published the latest data in terms of trade between the European Union and Russia in 2012. And in fact, we are reaching new records, and we are doing now better than before the crisis. The latest figures available shows our increase of our exports to Russia from 105 billion euros in 2009 to 123 billion now, and also an increase of exports of Russia to the European Union from 178 in 2009 to 213 billion of euros. These are the official statistics we received just yesterday. Of course, the deficit from the European side is explained because of our huge imports of energy. While our exports to Russia, 85% of them were manufactured goods, energy accounted for more than 3/4 of our imports from Russia. So, generally speaking, trade between the European Union and Russia is going very well. But it can go better. And this is precisely one of the issues we have discussed today in a constructive spirit, analyzing some of these matters. President Putin already mentioned some, this issue of the recycling fees, where I hope now that these measures announced by the Russian side will be implemented in a non-discriminatory manner. These recycling fees for cars. There are also other issues, I'm not going now in detail, phytosanitary matters. The Russian side also has some complaints on our side, to be fair. I think what we can say today is that I saw a real spirit of commitment to try to solve these issues and address them very constructively, as soon as possible. Because the potential of our trade relation is an investment relation. Here in Yekaterinburg, there are many European companies. The potential is immense, and as President Putin also said, the European Union is by far the biggest partner in economic terms of Russia, and we intend to remain so. That's why to facilitate all exchanges is important. And this also in terms, of course, of the general atmosphere in the country, in terms of rule of law, so everything that relates also to the civil society, to the rule of law, all these matters are very important, not only, of course, from a political point of view that is critically important, but also, I think, for the creation of an even better atmosphere in the economic relationship between Russia and the European Union.
As for the concerns of our partners who are operating in Russia, those partners who are concerned about business environment, name me just one of them. We're going to talk to them directly. We'll find out what are the obstacles impeding their work. As for excessive administrative pressure, corruption, we are always engaging in a dialogue directly with our partnership. There are special mechanisms which serve as a platform for discussing those matters. You've touched upon a very important issue, the bilateral restrictions of trade. That is what we are addressing now. I believe this is the only clear answer to the question what our European partners and we are doing now. We have mutual recriminations, but there is nothing surprising here. And relations between the US and the EU, there are many problems, outstanding issues as well within the WTO as well. Of course, there are issues to be addressed. There are restrictions, for example, on the import of Russian mineral fertilizers into the European market. Even though we've acceded to the WTO, still we have not achieved any progress with regard to those restrictions on mineral fertilizers to the EU. We've talked about those issues today, and we recognize that those claims are justified. I'm ashamed that we have not yet resolved the issues, but we meet in order to do that. As for Mr. Karev's flight to Paris, this is simply because his wife lives in Paris. He is free to go to Paris or get back to Russia, to choose the place of living, so we shouldn't flame this issue or exaggerate it. There is no problem whatsoever. But on the whole, as far as our relations with the EU are concerned, in the economic field in particular, we've already told you about that. Despite the issues that persist in the world economy, notably in the European economy, our trade with the EU has increased by 1.4%, and it has hit record levels of 410 billion US dollars, and we are moving forward. The last question, the Russian journalist, please. I have a question which has not yet been mentioned today, but which is of great importance for society. We witness a strengthening trend in Europe towards the spread of same-sex marriages in Europe, and that is a source of concern to us because the adoption of children is concerned here. President Putin, has this question been raised during the consultations? And I have a question to European guests. We know the EU pays a great attention to human rights in the world, freedom of speech, and so on and so forth. Certainly, you couldn't miss the fact that the US has initiated a legal process against Bradley Manning. There's leaked some information to WikiLeaks. What is your attitude towards that question? You know, I'm fed up with all those questions about same-sex marriages. Wherever I come, there are also always people who are brandishing those flags. rainbow flags. I've already talked about that repeatedly. I don't think there is any discrimination whatsoever in Russia against these phenomena. Our legislation is very liberal. Whatever people's sexual preferences are, they can make a career, they can work wherever they want, because we judge on their merits, on their professional qualities. I believe everyone should be more tolerant and there should be less aggression. This applies both to heterosexual and homosexual people, and this will be better for everyone. Secondly, as concerns the law on prohibitions of adopting children by same-sex couples, I have not seen such a draft law, but if it is submitted to me by the parliament, then I'm going to sign it. Mic to the speaker, please. Mic to the speaker, please. Did the government engage in a dialogue with those who protest in the street? What is now going on goes contrary to what you call the color revolutions in Africa and in other countries. But in Russia, you don't call those revolutions the color revolutions. You say that those revolutions are initiated by agents provocateurs from other countries. It would be wonderful if you asked the question, not made a statement. Mr. Buriev said that his email was per-illustrated and he was interrogated. I'm sorry, you forgot to ask a question. Could you please introduce yourself? My name is Pilar Bonet from El País. Can you guarantee the security of Mr. Gureev if he returns to Russia? Are there any grounds for imprisoning him? I don't know anything about that. It's just recently that I got to know this surname. I don't know whether he's committed any crimes. If he has not, then there is nothing he should fear. If he's engaged in any economic activity in Russia, it is up to him to decide whether to do that in Russia or in France. For what is going on in Turkey and the NGOs, I do not think you should draw any comparison between Turkey and Russia. Have you read anything about that? Have you read the Russian law that has been adopted? There is no talk about closing those NGOs. The only thing that is required by this law is that the NGOs disclose the information regarding their funding. If they get money from foreign agents, they should declare themselves as foreign agents, provided that they get money from abroad, but they're not closed. And I don't see any connection to the Arab Spring. Well, if you have a discussion, I invite you to a discussion. Please respect other journalists. As for dialogue, we are ready to be engaged in this dialogue with everyone. Mic to the speaker, please. Mic to the speaker, please. So the woman, unfortunately, prevented Mr. Van Rompuy and Mr. Barroso from answering the question with regard to Bradley Manning. What is your attitude towards these legal proceedings that are ongoing in the US?
Look, I have to say very frankly that I don't know enough about the legal proceedings going on in the US. And I'm sorry, it's probably my ignorance, but I'm not informed enough. And in fact, this was not discussed today in the discussion with the President Putin. What I can tell you regarding the fundamental issues that we've mentioned, not to leave you without an answer, is the following, for you to understand the position of the European Union. in terms of, for instance, homosexuality, we believe in the European Union that there is a very important principle, is the principle of non-discrimination. And we are very committed to the principles of non-discrimination, neither based on gender, on age, on ethnic specificities, on any kind of thing, including, of course, on sexual orientation. So we are against discrimination regarding homosexuals. Now, regarding the issue of the same-sex marriages, we consider this part of the family policy, and it's treated at national level. There is not one norm at European level. We have countries like mine that accept the same-sex marriages, others like France that just now adopted, and others that do not accept the same-sex marriages, or at least they treat them as unions of different sexes. So it's what, according to what we call the principle of subsidiarity, is regulated at national level and not at European level. There is not a norm for this. There are different situations according to the national legislation. But the principle against discrimination, this is very important, and this is enshrined, in fact, in the European Charter of Human Rights, and we believe it's an important. And by the way, when I know that in other parts of the world there are people that are persecuted, that are in fact sometimes killed because they have a different sexual orientation, we condemn that. And this is part of our dialogue with countries in the world where homosexuality is criminalized. So I think I gave you a broad, let's say, explanation of what we feel in the European Union regarding these issues, while underlining that there are different solutions according to the different national legislation on some sensitive matters. These matters of same-sex marriage, adoption or co-adoption. This is a matter that is extremely difficult. There are different situations in different countries. By the way, there is going on a very interesting debate in some of our countries about what could happen in case of the adoption. There are many different responses to that. It's, I think, a societal debate that should be addressed with a sense of responsibility.
Спасибо большое.
Давайте, последняя девушка, нельзя сказать.
We can't refuse to women. So the last question. Thanks a lot for your attention. We know that the energy area depends a lot on rare metals, rare earth metals. Could you please talk more on the areas where Russia and the EU could cooperate more, given that? And the other question is, if you have discussed today the issue of thorium energy. No, we haven't discussed that today, though it's a very important issue. But as for the construction, we've been working in this area for some time already. It's a sensitive issue. It is related to some enterprises dealing in the construction industry in Germany, France, partly in Spain. In Spain, there are many problems at the moment related to transferring some enterprises to Russia, and I believe that the unemployment rate in Spain is very high at the moment, especially the youth unemployment rate. But we've bought a share there, and at the moment we are considering manufacturing options in our enterprises, I mean in air construction and in the outer space cooperation. And at the moment we are actively engaged in negotiations, and if we achieve some mutually acceptable solutions, I believe that both Russia and the EU will support that. But at the moment it is too early to discuss that. We are engaged in such discussions at a very high level, and the prospects are promising. I believe that our agreements will have impact on the whole system, energy system. I'd like to thank the Chairman of the European Union and the Chairman of the European Commission for the direct support of Yekaterinburg in their bid for hosting the Expo 2020. We should keep in mind that Yekaterinburg is an industrial district, a very important industrial district. Of course, the commissioners are not going to vote, but hundreds and thousands of enterprises of the European Union are operating both in the Ural region and in Russia. Thanks a lot.